Is it gonna? Ah, it's too bright. It's too bright. It's okay. All right. Chapter 7. It's actually I could just send it to you, Nick. I'll just send it to you. Yeah. We'll get a live reaction. Get a live reaction from my dear friend. Photo has been seen. Yeah. 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 All right, let's start into chapter 7. Uh Chapter 7, Live the End Times, the Many Faces of Modern Cynics. There is no space here to chart the subsequent development of modern cynicism through the 19th and 20th century, though it is worth indicating where such an account might begin. Building on previous work, we might start with the modification of cynicism by the Counter-Enlightenment representatives of the movement, such as Edmund Burke, along with contemporaries of his who are participating in a wider propaganda war against the French Revolution that was bankrolled by the British government, worked together in attacking and uh, travestying the cynic Rousseau. Though his attackers would not have pictured themselves in this way as they submitted Rousseau to a thorough chewing over, they participated in the further development of modern cynicism. Burke famously argued against the kinds of abstract intellectualism he associated with the Enlightenment in favor of a more practical. Pimple on my forehead. Of a more practical, pragmatic accommodation to the everyday forces of unthinking prejudice and tradition. Historically accrued conventions and habits should be valued for their social usefulness and contribution to stability rather than demolished, Burke claimed. In making this argument, Burke reinstated the very forces that the Enlightenment had sought to overcome. Given that Burke's view, the given that Burke given that in Burke's view, the uneducated masses are unaware of the value to existing society of their unthinking conventions and habits, men such as himself should be tasked with identifying and defending these British virtues, ensuring they remain undisturbed by any kind of revolutionary agitation. British habits and their accompanying institutions and hierarchies are said to require the gentle guidance of liberal gentlemen of Birken persuasion and should be protected from any kind of radical or hasty adjustment. Though Burke would certainly not adopt the term cynic, he nonetheless displayed what one might describe as a uniquely modern paternalistic form of cynicism, a form of cynicism that underpins the logic of government manipulation and institutional care. It is the cynicism of those who seek to shape public opinion by manipulating its already existing tendencies and habits. This is cynicism of spin doctors, media empires, social networking sites, data analysis politicians, PR firms, image consultants, advertising agencies, and lifestyle coaches. Such agencies clearly further their own interest as the interest of power and capital, and in that sense follow a narrow dictionary definition of cynicism. But this is not all they do. Their cynic paternalism takes a more developed form of these activities are understood and justified, namely as activities that will also benefit those they manipulate either by serving the public configured as a social and political abstraction or by diverting it with an endless array of life hacks memes, and consumer goods. This very claim to assist the public it exploits to help a public it will never trust to help itself is at the root of its cynicism. The critique of cynicism. Typical depictions of modern cynicism do not focus on its paternalistic or beneficent side. In the popular imagination, modern cynicism is portrayed very differently as an individual flaw or a social malice that requires urgent attention, if not remedial action. According to its detractors, it is characterized by suspicion of higher ideals and retreat from the public realm to a private sphere of stoked up, injurious grievances. This retreat is associated with with a dismissal of positive value of critique, a distrust of collective solutions and institutional interventions, a refusal to invest any hope in social and political reform and in selective deafness directed toward all calls to social attention and transformation, which are rejected outright in an advance for their futility, futility. When civil society and and its social institutions are blamed for the role of producing cynical attitudes, they are only gently impunged for giving populations undue reason to be cynical as a result of occasional lapses in good governance, as an effect of various flaws and failures, scandals, and shenanigans that have been made public by the occasional whistleblower and the operations of a zealous press. The great stupidity of mass cynicism from this point of view lies with its inability to distinguish between good and bad governance. Mass cynicism is an irrational, exaggerated state of disappointment, a near infantile, oh wait, a near yeah, infantile mode of response to individual case of inadequacy, institutional failure, or corruption. Having reacted disproportionately, contemporary cynics cut themselves off, transforming disappointment into a cynic determination to disregard all offices and institutions as inevitably flawed, deciding that nothing can be done or that all effort will eventually come to naught. The cynic abdicates individually responsibility, commits to political indifference, and contributes thereby to the further erosion of everything the cynic bemoans. The solution in envisaged envisaged. Oh, I've never heard it said. The solution envisaged is this critique of cynicism is to restore the institutions of democratic society so that they may once again adequately serve, provide, and care for their citizenry, clawing back due respect that was lost in many cases undeservedly, or at least to absolutely restoring faith, healing communities, returning meaning and purpose to social and political life and reconstructing the public realm on which the meaning depends. The path of restoration is arduous and long, but the stakes are too high to abandon it. Modern cynicism is approached as a personal and interpersonal epidemic that requires extended treatment. The restorative process must be patronized and resourced adequately if it is to succeed, which demands, among other things, the very existence, intellectual fortitude, ex- expenditure, expenditure of time. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. Expenditure. Resources and goodwill of the educated critic, the writers of books against cynicism. These books may express their own disappointment, but the discontent of the educated critic is measured and targeted, dismayed by a populace that does not think in their image. Critics bemoan those who do not respond with collective outrage, those who have yet to mobilize against the forces of an injustice that the social critic describes with such righteous indignation. Collective apathy is the typical diagnosis. It is a consequence of the cynicism. Its critics, God, decide that what cynicism demands is a more of the same, that is to say, more of them, as they offer more critical insights, careful diagnosis, visionary mission statements, reason to listen, and declaration of optimism. Critics discover that the problem with contemporary cynics is that they lack a political imagination. Commentators identify an intellectual, imaginative deficient permeating mainstream culture to which they respond with offerings of their own. This cynicism, they argue, has become a routine, a banal mode of interaction, and a habitual point of view and way of seeing the world that automates contempt and manufactures distrust, and thereby continues to operate as a self reinforcing prophecy of its own continued existence. As a social ill, it requires, among other things, an injection of hope. To rescue, it suffers from their unwarranted negativity, which saps people's confidence in politics and public officials, who, so the cynic wrongly too absolutely assumes, are driven by the will to power. As such, forgo their commitments to the public good in favor of personal advancement. This jaded cynicism interprets all action, however apparently noble, as driven by base inclinations. From the cynic point of view, democratically elected politicians are more concerned with winning than governing. True. Professionals are more concerned with the career advancement, and companies are more concerned with profit and the protection against litigation than they are with public service. Just how Russell Westbrook is more concerned about his trip dub than getting a win. All these assumptions must be countered. This cynicism is said to be the product of a dangerous, self denying, socially destructive lack of faith and a dogmatic, unthinking rejection of all efforts to social betterment. It is the condition of those who operate on the blanket assumption that individuals and institutions are driven before all else by self serving impulse, an inbuilt, insatiable greed, and therefore cannot be trusted. Those who rail against the malignant effects of this cynical condition, complain that cynics are guilty of extending their own reduced understanding of the world to others. From this point of view, the psychological and sociological realism of the cynic and the cynic's claim to have seen the bottom of things is really nothing but an expression of the cynic's own abject selfishness and moral impoverishment. Suffering in this way, cynics overgeneralize their own diminished outlook and extend it to those who have yet lost all hope in human possibility. Modern cynicism, this complaint continues, is the regrettably widespread condition of those who assume that everyone else is as cynical as they are, a baseline assumption that seals a cynic within his or her own self-reinforcing assumption about the state of the world. Pictured in this way, contemporary cynicism is held responsible for a multitude of ills ranging from disaffection, political apathy, oh, and cultural decline to the dangerous lack of faith in Enlightenment ideals and internal weakening of liberal democracies. As a cultural phenomenon, it is blamed for a general lack of commitment to institutions and cultural values of those politites, as well as a kind of blanket skepticism and suspicion of truth claims, expertise, and authority that give rise to the phenomenon post truth politics. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Though individual critiques, including many of those cited above and below, may set out their stall with care, they nonetheless support or at least play into a pejorative use of the term cynic that is typified by its attachment to others, always others. The word cynic is mobilized without irony to express disappointment at other people's disappointment at the state of things. What? The word cynic is mobilized without irony to express disappointment at other people's disappointment at the state of things. It's actually a really cool line. Oh, oh, I'd go blind just to see you. I'd go far just to have you near. The cynicism is so targeted, is blamed for its politically deleterious effects, including a lack of commitment to shared endeavors or community initiatives that must themselves be underpinned by commitment to the common good. A tendency to give up far too soon in the face of adversity and a selfish determination to survive circumstance but offer nothing back. In sum, for a collection of ills that is inevitably to lead to political and social disaster. Dang, I feel like I suffer from like all these. I don't really have a commitment to any community or its initiatives. A tendency to give up far too soon, yeah. And a selfish determination to survive circumstance, yeah. That's true. I kind of just get things done and kind of just without, I guess, one, taking pride in what I have done, or two, trying to get the most out of what I am doing. I'm just trying to get it done. Modern cynic, I guess. Though there is much worth attending to this list of grievances, the overall framing of this critique of cynicism is nonetheless problematic. To continue the argument made earlier, one might suggest that those who complain about and write against cynicism in this way offer fitting examples of disavowed paternalistic underside. All these complaints against cynicism function as so many justifications for the moral seriousness and social necessity of the person who draws attention to the danger of cynicism. They are based on a suspicion of populace that cannot be trusted to govern itself without the expert moral interventions of the social critic, academic specialist, columnist, welfare professional, and political careers, together with the institutional forces he or she represents. You know what? Let's go for 4 more minutes. Why not? The attraction and self-affirming satisfaction to be found in a critique of contemporary cynicism is such that in recent years the popular and academic presses have been flooded with complaints against cynicism, ranging from its apparent destruction of the American dream to its erosive effect on interpersonal relationships, is the bogey or great evil that confronts journalists with indifference, saps hope and authenticity from education, facilitates criminal warmongering, and the disregard of international rule of law tear apart families and communities, and denies us a better future. A tendency to rail against cynicism can, in short, serve to distract us from the co-implication of the institution it is said to undermine in its very production. I feel like this is probably like the most like in not important, but the most like easy to be grabbed section of the book. So hopefully, like, I have the foresight to come back. Yes, yes. Phoebe Bridgers posted. Sorry. I go blind just to see you. I go far just to have you here. Oh. Well, essentially. Oh, essentially, the new 1975 song came out today, and Phoebe Bridgers made like a little cameo. Um, yeah, it was just like a little cameo. I don't think she like provided any background vocals or anything like that, but um, no, it was great, and she posted some pictures from like the behind the scenes of the shoot. So, cause I'm in love with you. All right, Phoebe Bridgers, basically the number one lesbian in my life right now, and she has been for almost 2 years now. Yeah, she's her music is really sad. Her music is really sad. Let's continue. The radical left grievances. To gather up further of grievances, focusing now more exclusively on the radical left rather than progressive liberal humanist and conservative responses, is not able that, although the political stakes are adjusted, modern cynicism is blamed for its politically anesthetizing. What? I don't even know what that word is. It's like, oh my God. I don't even know how to go about saying that. Anesthetizing. Anesthetizing. Anesthesiologist. Anesthetizing. That's crazy. Anesthetizing effects. That is a crazy word. That is amazing. That's such a great word to use. Wow. Anesthetizing. That is a really strong word. Mass cynicism has been condemned for pervading the multitude with bad sentiments, rendering it more susceptible to capitalism whims. This cynicism is not conceptualized as a personal flaw, or not only, but is systematically produced by capital. It is understood to be the more or less direct product of late capitalist exploitation of a system that is built according one recent characterization on the intimate diffusion and viral corruption of life by capital deleting its potential and recording it into subject and agent of productive behaviors. Individuals become alienated from themselves and able to find purchase within a system of power that has itself become extremely diffuse. Extremely diffuse. Interesting. That pervades daily life, that manifests everywhere as an insidious presence that has all but colonized us as human beings. With power no longer centralized in dominant institutions but distributed through vast networks of information and finance, with power no longer easily identifiable or assailable, a population with almost a population will almost inevitably fall into a state of collective fatalism, despair, and apathy if the causes of its cynicism are not grasped and countered by mass mobilization, by activities that prove to a populace that it does still have within its grasp the means to change its future and combat the co-option of life by capital through non-cynical, hopeful collective action. The stakes could be higher because, according to the service possible, to the severest possible assessment, the sardonic laughter of today's cynic may ultimately be in leagues in league with fascism. The sheer scope of modern cynicism is part of the problem. It is said to range from ignorant indifference, or disaffected disappointment, to informed callousness, with little or nothing of positive note in between. Man, there's some really good words. From this perspective, as a product of structural forces, mass cynicism can perhaps be forgiven for its stupidity so long as it yields to remedy. So I guess what it's saying here is, or at least what I'm grasping from it, is one of the reasons why at least modern cynicism is the way that it is because that the institutions that cause such um, lack of passion or lack of drive, or at least a sort of mal view on society itself, is because they are so unattainable, or they are so like solid in terms of societal operation that it almost expedites the levels of cynicism because they're so unable to be affected and so unable to be changed, that our only reaction is to be dissatisfied with the state and to continue to be dissatisfied with the state with no further action because of how in place and how untouchable they are, I think is what they're saying. You know, there's just no possibility for change because the possibility for change is such a steep mountain to climb. So what is the point of trying to change? And I guess that means we look down on those, or not look down, but we get tired of those who continue to fight for change, is what I'm thinking. But yeah, we're in the dog years of this book, so really excited for that. Thank you, everybody.